My name is Rachel Monroe, and I'm 28 years old. I live in Chicago, Illinois, where the skyline gleams at night like a promise I've never been allowed to touch. By day, I work as a data analyst in a logistics company, my world filled with spreadsheets and formulas. By night, I carry the invisible weight of a family that has always treated me as a background character in a play that starred someone else. That December, when snow fell thick outside my apartment in Lakeview, I found myself curled on the sofa with a mug of cocoa, only to be shaken by a call that changed everything. My mother's voice came through, not warm, not tender, but cold as ice. "You are banned from Christmas until you apologize to your sister, Melissa." Behind her, I could hear glasses clinking, music echoing, laughter rolling through the phone. My entire family was gathered in my parents' house in Evanston, and I had been exiled as if I were a stranger. I asked why, my voice steadier than my heart. The answer cut like a blade. I had embarrassed Melissa at her birthday party in October when I mentioned her hidden credit card debt. They acted as if I had committed treason, as if speaking truth was a crime. Yet what none of them knew was how many nights I had stayed awake covering Melissa's bills. How often I had saved her from collectors and late fees. She was the golden child, reckless but adored, forgiven before she ever apologized. I was the other daughter, the one who paid hospital bills when my father needed heart surgery, the one who kept electricity on, the internet working, the car insured, all without complaint. And now, for daring to speak a truth they couldn't bear, I was cast out. The sound of their celebration carried on as if I didn't exist. My chest tightened with bitterness more than pain. I remembered my years at the University of Michigan, juggling 2 jobs just to survive while Melissa lived downtown in a sleek apartment, every expense covered by my parents. I thought things would change when I graduated, when I built stability for myself. But all it meant was becoming their silent banker, the invisible thread keeping them from financial ruin. Every bill, every urgent call, every reckless decision they landed on my shoulders. They never thanked me. They never saw me. They only reached for more. That night, I pulled out my laptop and opened a blank Excel file. My fingers shook as I began to type, one line after another. I recorded what I had paid, the $12,000 hospital bill for my father, utilities that drained over $10,000 through the years, Melissa's endless loans wrapped in the same false promise "I'll pay you back next week." The numbers bled across the screen, cold, undeniable. After 3 hours, the total stared back at me. $39,642, nearly $40,000, gone into a void of ingratitude. I printed the spreadsheet, slid the pages into a folder, and wrote on the cover, "This is what I've done, and what I will no longer do." The words of my mentor Grace echoed in my mind. "Boundaries aren't cruelty, Rachel. They're love with a backbone." I had nodded once, dismissing her wisdom, but now it rang like a bell. Love without boundaries wasn't love at all. It was servitude. That folder became my line in the sand. I would no longer bleed silently. I would no longer be erased. A week before Christmas, I began severing ties. I canceled the mortgage autopay linked to my account, my heart pounding as confirmation flashed across the screen. I split the phone plan, refusing to keep paying for lines I never used. I removed my card from the internet and utility accounts. And finally, with trembling hands, I called the bank to cancel the supplementary card Melissa had been abusing for years. Each step was like unlocking a chain that had been wrapped around me for far too long. Still, I wanted them to see it clearly. I prepared a survival folder with instructions how to contact the bank, how to set up their own autopays, how to take responsibility. It wasn't kindness. It was closure. I wanted no excuses, no way for them to crawl back with pleas of confusion. For once, they would stand on their own 2 feet. On Christmas Eve, when Chicago glowed under a blanket of lights, my phone rang again. It was my mother. Frantic, "The mortgage hasn't been paid. The bank is calling." Behind her words, I could hear laughter and clinking glasses. They were still feasting, still celebrating. But they only thought of me when the bills were due. I took a deep breath and told her I'd bring a gift. That evening I stood at my parents' doorway. The warmth spilled out, music and chatter, until silence fell when they saw me. I carried the folder in my hands, heavy as stone, and dropped it on the table beside the Christmas tree. My voice was steady, sharper than glass. "I've paid for all of this for years. Here's the proof. But as of today, I am no longer this family's bank." My father's face crumpled. My mother's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. Melissa spat out accusations, calling me petty, trying to shame me again. I slid across the proof screenshots of every text where she begged for money, every broken promise. Her face turned crimson, her words collapsing into a hollow shout. The room was heavy with truth, undeniable and raw. I stood tall, my voice cutting through their silence. Nearly $40,000. Years of my youth, my sleep, my dreams sacrificed so you could live carelessly. And for that, I was erased from Christmas. If love only exists when I pay for it, then I don't need that love. The air grew thick, the fire crackled, and I knew the balance had shifted forever. I turned, leaving the folder on the table. My mother's faint voice called after me, but I didn't stop. For the first time, I walked away carrying nothing but myself. The next morning, the silence was deafening. My phone, once buzzing with constant demands and reminders, sat still on the table. No notifications from the family group chat. No thinly veiled requests wrapped in casual messages. Just quiet. I made myself coffee, the steam rising into the cold Chicago air, and realized that this silence wasn't emptiness. It was freedom. For years, every buzz on my phone had been a trigger, my heart racing in anticipation of another plea for money, another reminder that my worth to them was measured in dollars. Now, as the stillness surrounded me, I felt both the ache of abandonment and the first taste of peace. Curiosity made me scroll through Facebook. The first post I saw was Melissa's, a picture-perfect shot of the glowing Christmas tree in my parents' living room, captioned with words dripping in manipulation. So sad when someone with the same blood forgets family. Money can never replace love. Her friends filled the comments with sympathy, but for the first time, there were cracks. Cousins and relatives I thought would always stay silent left words of truth. Family has to be fair. If it weren't for Rachel, that house would have been gone years ago. My heart clenched reading those lines. Not joy, not vindication, just a quiet sadness that it had taken so long for anyone to see me. The truth had always been there, yet they ignored it until I bled in front of them. That afternoon, my phone rang again. It was my father. His voice, usually firm and commanding, came through hesitant, almost small. Rachel, how do you set up autopay for the mortgage? I've never done it. I always relied on you. For a moment, I sat frozen. Here was the man who had once joked that Melissa was the future, while I was just good with numbers. Now admitting he didn't know how to handle the very basics I had carried for years. I inhaled deeply before answering. You'll need to call the bank directly. They'll guide you step by step. But it has to be under your name. Silence lingered on the other end. Then a faint, humbled thank you. It wasn't just a question about bills, it was the first crack in his armor. An unspoken recognition that he had leaned on me too long. That evening, a message arrived from my mother. Only one line, but it cut deep. I never realized you did so much. We'll try to handle things ourselves. No apology, no full acknowledgement. But for her, those words were monumental. I read the message over and over, tears filling my eyes. It was the closest I had ever come to being seen by her. And though it couldn't heal all the scars, it was something I had longed for since childhood. Days passed in quiet. The group chat remained empty, as if frozen in time from the moment I laid the folder on the table. At first, I didn't know what to do with the silence. My life had revolved around their needs for so long that without them, I felt unmoored. But gradually, I saw it differently. Silence wasn't abandonment, it was space. Space to breathe, to grow, to reclaim the years I had given away. I began to turn inward. One snowy afternoon, sitting in a cafe near my office, I clicked submit on my application to Northwestern University's MBA program. My heart raced as the confirmation email arrived. For years, I had told myself I couldn't pursue my dreams because my money had to be reserved for family emergencies. Now, I was investing in myself. It was terrifying. It was liberating. At home, I opened the drawer where I once kept an envelope labeled family emergencies. Inside had always been the cash I set aside for the inevitable call. The frantic message, the crisis that was never mine yet always landed on my lap. That day, I emptied the envelope, depositing every dollar into a new savings account I labeled personal plan. The act felt ceremonial, as if I were breaking a curse. That money was no longer a lifeline for others, it was fuel for my own future. My first goal was bold but simple. Iceland. I had dreamed of seeing the northern lights since I was a child. Reading stories about the sky glowing like fire over frozen landscapes, I created a folder named Aurora Trip, filled it with research on flights, hotels, and tours. Each time I transferred money into that account, I felt a spark of joy. as if I were inching closer to a sky that promised beauty after years of darkness. Evenings became my sanctuary. I no longer rushed home to bills and spreadsheets for my family. Instead, I joined yoga classes, read books on psychology and finance, experimented with cooking. I invited colleagues over, discovering that family could be chosen, not just inherited. And every morning, taped to my refrigerator, a bold note reminded me I have the right to live for myself. One night, Grace, my mentor, invited me to dinner. I told her everything: the Excel file, the folder, the confrontation. She listened, then said with quiet conviction, "Rachel, you've done what most people never dare. You set boundaries. You didn't just save yourself. You gave them the chance to grow. Never forget, this love isn't paying someone else's bills." Tears blurred my vision as I laughed softly, because for the first time, someone told me I was right, not cruel. That night, I returned home, opened a notebook, and wrote those words again. I have the right to live for myself. And for the first time in years, I believed them. As the days slipped into the new year, I noticed something I had never experienced before: peace. It was fragile at first, like a candle flame flickering in a draft, but it grew stronger with each sunrise. I woke without dread, without my chest tightening at the thought of another request. My money stayed in my own account. My evenings stretched wide open, and my mind began to wander toward possibilities instead of debts. For years, my identity had been swallowed by numbers that belonged to everyone but me. Now, those numbers became mine again, and with them, I began to feel whole. But memories have a way of clawing back when you least expect them. One snowy evening, as I sat in my apartment sipping tea, I remembered last Christmas Eve, the one that broke me. My mother had called after their feast, her voice casual, dismissive. "We saved you a portion. It's on the porch. Come pick it up." I drove through icy streets, parked outside their glowing house, and found a foil-covered plate sitting on the frozen steps. Cold turkey, hardened potatoes, a cracked cookie. Even the neighbor's cat circled it. As if surprised a human could be treated with such disdain, I had stood there with numb hands, staring at that plate, realizing I wasn't just excluded from the table, I was excluded from family itself. That night, I left the food behind and drove away, the hollowness inside me deeper than any hunger. Remembering it now, I felt a sharp pang, but also a strange strength. I knew I would never allow myself to be treated that way again. The blue folder sat on my bookshelf, neat and silent, a reminder of all I had endured. Sometimes I opened it, scanning the numbers, the debts, the lies, but it no longer made me cry. It reminded me that I had once been drained, once been invisible, and that I had found the courage to stop. It had transformed from evidence of exploitation into a monument of my survival. Weeks passed, and though the family group chat remained silent, cracks began to appear. One night, my father called again. His voice trembled. "Rachel, I'm sorry for treating you like a wallet. You saved us so many times, and I never said thank you. I was wrong." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My father had never apologized to me, never admitted weakness. I pressed the phone to my ear, my eyes burning. "I know," I whispered. "Thank you for saying that." His voice shook as he added, "I want to learn how to manage things myself. I'll make mistakes, but I hope you'll be patient." A small, bitter-free smile tugged at my lips. "Dad, I don't want you perfect. I just want respect." It was a fragile step, but it was real. For once, I wasn't begging for acknowledgement. It was offered freely, even if late, and that tiny crack of honesty mattered more than all the years of empty praise lavished on Melissa. Not long after, my mother called too. Her voice carried hesitation, as though stripped of the authority she always wielded. "If you want, there's a seat for you at the dinner table tonight. I think you should come home." I paused, the words pulling at the part of me that still longed for belonging. I could hear music in the background, the sounds of cooking. The family gathered once again. A part of me wanted to step into that warmth, but another part, stronger now, asked a single question. "Is there respect?" "Two, Mom, or just a chair?" Silence stretched on the line. I could almost see her in the kitchen, darting eyes, unsure how to respond. Finally, she whispered, I don't know yet, but I'll try." That night, I stayed home. I made pasta, opened a bottle of wine, and watched fireworks explode over Chicago. As I gazed out the window, I whispered to myself, not being there doesn't make me less their daughter, but accepting a chair without respect would make me less of myself. And for once, I chose myself. The months that followed reshaped me. I built routines that nourished me: long walks along the lake, quiet mornings with books, yoga classes where I learned to breathe deeply and release the weight I had carried for so long. I saved steadily toward my Iceland trip, each dollar tucked away like a promise of light after darkness. The thought of standing under the northern lights kept me moving, a dream that belonged only to me, and slowly, my world began to expand. I built friendships outside of obligation, people who valued my presence without needing my sacrifice. Colleagues became companions. My apartment transformed from a lonely space into a haven filled with laughter and warmth. For the first time, I realized family could be chosen: those who honored you, those who stood beside you without draining you. Through it all, one truth burned bright: love is not measured by how much you endure or how much you give until you are empty. Real love exists where there is respect, where boundaries are honored, where presence means more than money. I had confused silence for love, sacrifice for duty. Now I knew better. As spring arrived, I looked out at the city and felt something I had never felt before. Hope, not the fragile hope that others would change, but the sturdy hope that I had changed and that no one could take that from me. A year passed faster than I expected, marked not by crises or late-night calls, but by small victories that belonged to me alone. When December arrived again, Chicago lit up with strings of lights and bustling shoppers. But inside my apartment, the atmosphere was different from any Christmas before. There was no frantic tapping on my calculator, no gnawing fear that if I didn't cover a bill, my family would collapse. Instead, there was quiet, the hum of my heater, the soft glow of my own modest tree. For the first time, the season wasn't weighed down by obligation, it was filled with peace. On Christmas Eve, I sat in my armchair with a mug of cocoa, staring out at the snow as it blanketed the sidewalks. Families passed by outside carrying gifts, their laughter rising into the night. And for a fleeting second, a pang of longing struck me. Memories of past holidays, those filled with noise, food, and the illusion of togetherness surfaced like ghosts. But alongside them came the darker memory of the plate left on the porch: cold turkey, hardened potatoes, a cracked cookie. That image had branded me, teaching me the cruelest truth: that my place at their table had always been conditional, dependent on what I could provide. Tonight, sitting in my own warm space, I promised myself I would never accept such scraps again. The blue folder was still on my shelf, tucked away like a silent witness. I pulled it down, flipped through its pages, and felt a strange calm as I looked at the numbers. Where once those rows had made me tremble, now they were simply history. They were proof not just of what I had carried, but of what I had survived. The folder wasn't a weapon anymore. It was a reminder that I had once been exploited, and that I had found the courage to end it. As midnight approached, my phone rang. It was my father. His voice was gentler than I'd ever known it to be, stripped of pride, stripped of command. "Rachel," he said after a long pause, "I want to say again, I'm sorry. I thought providing money was your role because you were strong with numbers. I never realized it was crushing you. You saved us, and I never said thank you." My grip tightened on the phone, tears blurring my vision. For years, I had begged silently for acknowledgement. Now, the words came unprompted. I breathed deeply and whispered back, "Thank you, Dad. That means more than you know." His voice cracked slightly as he added, "I'm trying to learn. I'll stumble. But I don't want to put it all on you anymore." For the first time, I believed him, not because he had suddenly transformed into the father I always wanted, but because he admitted his weakness. That was more powerful than any hollow assurance. The next day, my mother sent me a short message. "We're learning. It's harder than we thought, but we'll manage." It wasn't a plea. It wasn't a manipulation. It was an admission. That was enough for me. Life unfolded differently after that. The silence that once scared me became fertile ground. I poured my energy into myself, my MBA program, my health, my friendships, my dreams. I started painting again, something I had abandoned in college because shifts and bills had consumed my time. I cooked elaborate meals not out of duty, but because I loved the flavors. I saved steadily toward my trip to Iceland, each deposit into my travel account making my heart lift. On New Year's Eve, as fireworks cracked across the sky, I stood at my window with a glass of wine. The city sparkled, alive with celebration. But I didn't feel left out. For once, I didn't equate absence from their table with absence from family. I had built something different: dignity, peace, and the quiet joy of living for myself. I want to share this with anyone listening. Setting boundaries is not cruelty. It is the truest form of self-respect. For years, I thought love meant sacrificing without question, enduring without complaint. But I learned the hard way that if you allow others to trample your limits, you don't just lose their respect, you lose yourself. Love that demands silence and money isn't love at all. It's a transaction. And a cruel one. The only way to reclaim your life is to close that account, no matter how much your hands shake when you cut the ties. If your family or anyone only values you when you pay their bills, have the courage to stop. You may feel hollow at first. You may weep in the silence. But on the other side of that silence is peace. The kind of peace that allows you to dream again, to live again, to see yourself not as a shadow but as a whole person. I don't know where I'll spend next Christmas. Maybe under the auroras of Iceland. Maybe in a cozy cafe with friends who love me for who I am. But one thing is certain. I will never again be locked out by my own wallet. I will never again confuse exploitation with love. I have given responsibility back to the people who should have carried it, and I have kept for myself the most precious gift of all, the right to live freely, without needing permission. So if you're listening, and you've ever felt like I have forgotten, used, erased, know this. You have the right to stand up. You have the right to draw the line. And once you do, you'll find what I found in the stillness of a Chicago night. Yourself? Thank you for staying with me through my story. If it touched you, please subscribe to Vengeance Within, where voices like mine rise from silence, and truths long buried finally find light.